Fair warning, rant mode's going up to 11 in this one. If you retired, or even just a decade away from it, and you still believe that your pension is the safest, most untouchable pot of money you'll ever own, then I need you to brace yourself. Seriously, because from April 2027, almost every unspent pound inside that pension could be hit with a whopping 40% inheritance tax charge. That's not some wild rumour, folks. That's Treasury policy, already inked, signed, and just waiting to kick in. But there's more. Add in those stubbornly frozen income tax bands, new commutation factors that are set to shrink your lump sums, and a state pension rise that frustratingly often just gets swallowed whole by the taxman anyway. Now, when you put it all together, 2025 is really shaping up to be the most expensive year to retire in living memory. So, stick with me. Today, we're not just mapping out the three biggest tax shift heading straight for the UK retirees, but we're also, and more importantly, diving into the smart moves you can make right now to keep HMRC's hands off your hard-earned money. So let's get into it. Let's kick off with a change that hits the very second you decide to touch your pension pot. The good news is the 25% cash free still there, but everything you take out above that tax-free chunk is now being dragged deeper into income tax. And that's because of the personal allowance. That sweet spot where you pay zero tax is stubbornly frozen at £12,570 until at least 2028. Your pension grows, inflation pushes up, your other income, maybe you get a modest pay rise, yet that personal allowance stays nailed to the floor. It's like running on a treadmill that keeps speeding up while the finish line stays the same distance away. So what does this mean for us? Imagine a retiree with £30,000 pension, £25,000 drawdown from their SIP. They're already at £42,430 into the basic tax rate band. Now let's say they decide to treat themselves perhaps an extra £10,000 for a new car they've always wanted or a dream holiday. Suddenly, that £10,000 slice isn't taxed at 20%, it's hit with a hefty 40% charge. Ouch. Now, here's the kicker, one that often catches people off guard. Emergency tax code. When you first make a withdrawal, providers often apply an emergency tax code, which can whack 20% or even 45% off the top. So you end up waiting months to reclaim your own money from HMRC. So what's the fix for all this? It's all about timing and strategy. Phase your drawdown carefully, aiming to keep each tax year's withdrawal under the high rate threshold. Think about it, why pay 40% when you can pay 20% by just spreading out that income? And if you can, explore using ISA transfers or spouse pensions to effectively split your income. Now, a quick phone call to your pension provider to nominate which pounds are tax-free and which are taxable can generally save thousands before the money even lands in your bank. It's a simple step that makes a big difference. Now, for what might sound like good news on the surface, the state pension jumped by a welcome 4.1% in April 2025, and that was an extra £470 a year for those on the full new state pension, which sounds lovely, doesn't it? But there's a Trojan horse. That extra income simply shoves even more retirees over the frozen personal allowance threshold. If you're receiving the full £11,502 a year state pension, it doesn't take much else to push you into taxable territory. You can add a small private pension, maybe some rental income from a buy-to-let, or even just a few dividends, and suddenly you're handed a chunk of that rise straight back to HMRC. The Treasury, it seems, wins twice. They get to look generous by uprating the benefit, then they quietly claw a significant proportion of it straight back in income tax. And for couples where one partner is still working, there's another trap. You can't even use the marriage allowance, which allows one partner to transfer a proportion of their personal allowance to the other if the working partner is already a basic rate taxpayer. Now, why? Because the state pension is classed as earned income, so it effectively uses up that allowance first. So what's the workaround? Well, if you're still healthy and earning elsewhere, seriously, you might want to consider deferring your state pension. Every 9 weeks you defer adds a full 1% to your weekly pension, and that's the equivalent of about 5.8% a year. It's guaranteed, which is pretty compelling. You can then turn it on and your other income drops, making it far more tax efficient. If you're already receiving it and finding yourself with surplus income, think about gifting it maybe. Gifting surplus income to family or charities can be done under this normal expenditure out of income exemption. And this is a really powerful tool because it leaves your estate immediately for inheritance tax purposes, and it keeps your immediate tax burden down. Just make sure you keep good records to demonstrate it's a regular pattern of giving from your income, not from capital. Let's talk about the headline grabber, the big one that's causing ripples across the financial planning world. From 6th of April 2027, most unused pension funds will officially form part of your estate for inheritance tax purposes. Now think about that for a second. Today, pensions generally sit outside your estate, making them an incredibly efficient way to pass wealth down the generations completely free of inheritance tax. But come 2027, unless it goes to a spouse or a qualifying dependent, that 40% of inheritance tax will apply to whatever's left. Now, let's look at the stark numbers. At a £400,000 SIP left to adult children currently escapes inheritance tax completely. That could suddenly become a staggering £160,000 tax bill. That's just not spare change, is it? Now, the government's logic behind this dramatic shift is pretty clear. They argue that pensions have, over time, morphed into an estate planning tool rather than simply vehicles for retirement income. And they want that loophole closed. It's important to note, though, that death in service benefits and dependent schemes, particularly from defined benefits or collective money purchase arrangements, are expected to remain exempt. However, the vast majority of drawdown pots and uncrystallised funds are firmly caught in the IHT net. Now, one crucial detail to grasp is that the obligation to report and pay this IHT will rest with your personal representatives, not the pension company. This means potential probate delays could see interest stacking up on the tax bill, adding another layer of stress during what's already a difficult time. So, are there any mitigation options? You could consider drawing down more aggressively now, moving money into ISAs where growth is capital gains tax free, although still exposed to IHT, or explore using discretionary bypass trusts before the rules bite in. Another incredibly smart route, if it fits with your family situation, is making pension contributions for children or grandchildren. Now, once that money is in their pot, it leaves your estate immediately, and they can even gain 25% tax relief to boot, which is a bit of a win-win. If you're anywhere near the £325,000 nil rate band or potentially impacted by this, you absolutely must get professional advice before 26-27 tax year ends. After that, honestly, the horse will have bolted. If you're finding this deep dive on tax useful, don't forget to click that subscribe button. If you've got any questions, put them down below. So moving on then, we have a change that might seem less dramatic than the IHT bombshell, but it's still equally costly for many. The new commutation factors, and they can take cash from defined benefit schemes. Now, what exactly is a commutation factor? Well, it's basically a conversion rate. It dictates how much lump sum you receive for every pound of annual pension you agree to give up. With gilt yields currently higher and life expectancy generally edging upwards, despite the recent blips, pension schemes are understandably cutting that rate. So let's do some rough maths to illustrate the impact. Now, under the old, more generous 12-to-1 factor, giving up £1,000 of annual pension would have brought you a neat £12,000 in tax-free cash. Now, under the new tougher 9-to-1 factor, the very same pension sacrifice will deliver only £9,000. That's a £3,000 difference for every grand of pension you exchange. Now, some schemes are offering protection for the old factors for members who submit their retirement application before the 1st of October, even if the actual payment of your pension and lump sum lands in November or December. Now, if you're already past the scheme's normal pension age, don't fret. This change won't touch you, so there's no rush there. Okay, so let's tie this all together into a clear, actionable timeline, something you can literally stick on your fridge and refer to. First, before the 6th of April 2026, you need to run a detailed forecast of your total income, and I mean everything. Your state pension, any rental income, dividends from investments, and of course, any salary if you're still working part-time. If that forecast shows you're within, say, £10,000 of the higher rate tax threshold, then you absolutely must plan your pension drawdowns carefully so that you stay under the £50,270 higher rate band. Proactively planning here can save you a bundle. Now, get into the habit of gifting surplus income if you can regularly. Now, this is powerful, often underused inheritance tax planning tool. Set up maybe a standing order to your children or contribute regularly to a junior ISA for your grandchildren. Now, by doing this consistently, it becomes normal expenditure out of income and is immediately IHT free. Just make sure you keep really good records. Then, between now and March 2027, critically review your pension's expression of wish forms. These vital documents tell your pension provider who you want your pot to go to when you pass away. Make absolutely sure your beneficiaries are clearly named and that the forms are up to date. This ensures that the pot doesn't default to your estate, which, as we discussed, will become subject to inheritance tax from 2027. Now, if your SIP is likely to sit untouched for years, consider a strategy of drawing down to the top of the basic rate band each year and moving the net cash into an ISA or an onshore bond. Now, growth inside these wrappers is still tax advantaged, and crucially, you've reduced your inheritance tax target within your pension pot. This strategy allows you to effectively shelter more of your wealth from future inheritance tax charges. Now, looking beyond 2027, the landscape changes yet again. Now, while the lifetime allowance is thankfully gone, meaning you can accumulate more in your pension without facing a separate tax charge, the IHT net on pensions widens significantly. Now, remember to keep your contributions under £60,000, which is the annual allowance. Be mindful that taking even a single penny of taxable income from a flexible pension pot triggers the money purchase annual allowance, the MPAA, and brings it right down to just £10,000. Okay, so I'm going to wrap up. So here's the big takeaway. Those frozen allowances mean more of your pension will be taxed as income. The state pension rise, while welcome, it's a bit of a Trojan horse, pushing many of us into that higher tax bracket. And the biggest shift from 2027, your leftover pension pot faces a 40% inheritance tax grab unless you take action. But there's some good news. You still have 2 full tax years to rearrange your affairs and get your house in order. Draw down smartly, gift surpluses where you can strategically, and above all else, keep those expression of wish forms meticulously up to date. Do nothing and HMRC could very well become the biggest beneficiary of your life's work. But take control and your family keeps what you spent decades building. Now, if you want to dive even deeper on any of these points, or perhaps look at some of the legal identity loopholes that do survive the 2027 change, the next video I'm releasing is going to cover exactly that. Now, thanks for watching. Take care of your money, and I'll see you on the next one.